Now, the one bit of good news that I saw this week, former Massachusetts Governor, Republican Bill Weld, announced 2 days ago that he is officially entering the race for president, becoming the first Republican to challenge this criminal lump of shit, Donald Trump, in the 2020 race. Weld said in a statement, quote, "Ours is a nation built on courage, resilience, and independence." Okay, might argue with that. In these times, the built on, I thought it was built on savagery, genocide, and slavery. Oh well, picky, picky. He goes on, in these times of great political strife, when both major parties are entrenched in their win-at-all-cost battles. Oh, give me a fucking break, Weld. The Democrats are not trying to win at all costs. They are trying to protect the Constitution, but fuck it. Let me go on with your bullshit statement. I hope you win. But let me go on. The voices of the American people are being ignored, and our nation is suffering. It is time for patriotic men and women across our great nation to stand and plant a flag. What the fuck? It must be metaphoric. Yeah, it has to be. It is time to return to the principles of Lincoln: equality, dignity, and opportunity for all. There is no greater cause on earth than to preserve what truly makes America great. I am ready to lead that fight. Yeah. They always are, aren't they? Ready to lead that fight. Now, if you remember, in 2016, Weld ran for president too, but he ran on the Libertarian Party ticket with the former governor of New Mexico, Gary Johnson. How'd that work out? He was a two-term governor of Massachusetts in the early 1990s. Massachusetts, being one of the bluest of blue states, has this habit of electing Republican governors. Mitt Romney was one. Weld told CNN's Jake Tapper that it would be a, quote, political tragedy, end quote. And he would, quote, fear for the republic, end quote, if the country had 6 more years of Trump. That's the one redeeming quality that I find in Weld, regardless of his bullshit announcement speech. Courage, resilience, independence. In a capitalist society, courage is required. Resilience is required. But independence is kind of an illusion. But I digress. Weld said in that interview with Jake Tapper, quote, "I really think if we have 6 more years of the same stuff we've had out of the White House the last 2 years, that would be a political tragedy, and I would fear for the republic. I would be ashamed of myself if I didn't raise my hand and run." Okay. Okay. Fair enough. Fair enough. And Weld said even if he doesn't get the Republican nomination, he's going to run as an independent. Okay. And according to the Gallup poll, and this is a part that leaves me almost comatose, seriously. It's a fact, according to the Gallup polling system, Trump enjoys almost 90% approval rating among Republicans. Wow. When he was asked about Trump's historically high approval ratings and whether Weld believes he can beat him in the primary, Weld said, "Yeah, I do." He said, quote, "particularly in New Hampshire, where I'm spending a lot of time. It's one vote at a time and one voter at a time, and you got to meet them, the voters." Now, Weld does, and he often has described himself as a Republican who works across the aisle and gets things done. Oh, fuck. How many times have you heard that from different candidates? But okay. He also said he would have what he calls a bipartisan cabinet if he won the presidency. Okay. All right. He said he is an economic conservative, adding that the United States, quote, deserves to have some fiscal restraint and conservatism and cutting spending in Washington, D.C. Okay, where are you going to cut, Mr. Weld? I'll tell you where I think you should cut. Not that you give a shit what I think, but start with the death budget, the war budget. That'd be a good place to start. We're approaching $1 trillion. That's $1,000 billion in expenditures on death, destruction, weaponry. Try cutting there. Or are you going to be like a usual Republican and go for Medicare, Social Security, Medicaid, all the social safety net things that we Americans fucking pay into? They're not entitlements. William Weld added that he thinks Donald Trump, quote, mocks the rule of law, end quote. Yeah. Weld said, quote, I spent 7 years in the Justice Department trying to keep the politics out of law enforcement, and he's trying to put it in. Weld added, quote, he has difficulty conforming his conduct to the requirements of law. That's a serious matter in the Oval Office. Conforming his conduct to the requirements of law. Wow, what a way to put it. Why not just come right out and say, Trump is a fucking lawbreaker? Every chance he gets, and some chances he just takes. He will break the fucking law. And what does Weld say? He spent 7 years. He said Trump has difficulty conforming his conduct to the requirements of law. Yeah, well, that's a pretty flowery way to put it. No offense against lawyers. My daughter-in-law is one, but boy, does that sound like lawyers speak, doesn't it? Your Honor, I want you to spare my candidate. I realize my candidate is on trial for murdering his mother and father. But, Your Honor, my candidate is an orphan. You've heard that one. Weld also slammed President Pigg's attitude toward climate change. I don't know what that means. And Trump's confrontational style toward the press. And while Weld does see blame, so-called both sides of the aisle, for the divisiveness coming from Washington, he said Trump is, quote, the grand master, or meister, end quote, of the problem. Weld added, I've never seen such bitterness in this country. Yeah, well, Mr. Weld, I'm very limited in my mental ability, in my intellectual power, in my accumulated knowledge. But God damn it, doesn't it seem, Mr. Weld, when you say you haven't seen, let me get the quote exact. When you say that I've never seen such bitterness in this country, okay, you've never seen it. But Jesus Christ, this is a country founded on slavery, massacres, genocide. This is a country that has an economic system that guarantees, that requires a huge percentage of the population to always be either unemployed or underemployed, that vast pool of labor that will fucking do anything for a job. And when capitalism is ready to pluck a few people out to keep their engine running, they do so. This is the most bitterness you've seen. That's because you're probably only in your 60s. Were you not around, Mr. Weld, during the bitterness that was generated by our war crimes against the Vietnamese, against the Cubans, the Salvadorans, the Dominicans, the Filipinos, the Iraqis, the Lebanese, the Palestinians? I am not trying to diminish your statement, Governor Weld, that you've never seen such bitterness. But maybe you've never seen it, my friend, because you just didn't want to. How about the bitterness of the civil rights movement? When black folk, for the most part, had to keep it tamped down. And even when their rescuers came along, like Dr. King and a whole list of people, and they were spat on and shit on and fire hosed and their churches burned and their children murdered, they had to keep it tamped down. You've not seen bitterness as you see it today? Well, Governor Weld, I suggest you've been living in a fucking vacuum. What you're seeing now is a president of the United States covering the nation 6 feet deep in poison, in bile, in hate. Maybe that's what you meant to say. Oh, there have been times much more bitter than these, Governor Weld. Trust me, I was around. But maybe you're just not aware of them. Hi, Truth Seekers. Mike Malloy here. As you know, we've switched formats and are now broadcast exclusively on the Progressive Voices Network. So that means you get fewer program interruptions, no corporate commercials, and lots of profanity. But our format change also means some of our radio listeners no longer hear the program. It's been a while since I mentioned our podcasts, so you may have forgotten that there is a way to listen to this program anytime you need a good dose of screaming. Visit MikeMalloy.com and subscribe to our podcasts. You have your choice. You can listen to the ranting with the audio podcast or listen and watch me lose control with a video podcast subscription. As a podcast subscriber, you can download the program to your mobile device and take me with you wherever you go. And if you have a friend who needs a dose of truth-seeking, you can give a gift subscription as well. That's MikeMalloy.com, and never miss a minute of the uncensored fun and frivolity.